There is a moment in some people's lives when everything they thought was solid turns out to be temporary. The apartment, the relationship, the version of yourself you had been carefully constructing for years, all of it in the space of a single evening becoming past tense. That was my November. I was 26 years old, and I was standing on a Chicago sidewalk at 11:15 at night with a duffel bag, a backpack, a dead phone, and the specific hollow feeling of someone who has just watched their life rearrange itself into something they do not recognize. The apartment had been Daniel's. I had known this, technically, for the 2 years I lived in it. My name was not on the lease. My name had not been on the lease because Daniel had said it was simpler that way, and I had accepted simpler that way because I had been, for 2 years, accepting things that were not right because the alternative, being alone, being without, had seemed worse. It had not seemed worse tonight. Tonight I had said the things I should have said a year earlier. I had said them clearly, and without the careful management I had always applied to conversations with Daniel, and he had responded with the specific coldness of someone who had never actually loved you and was now relieved to have a reason to confirm it. He had asked me to leave. I had left. Standing on the sidewalk in November in Chicago, I became aware of several things in rapid succession. That my phone was dead. That my closest friends, Priya, who was my best friend of 8 years, and Marcus, who was my college roommate, both lived on the other side of the city. That the money in my checking account was real, but the nearest ATM was 3 blocks away, and the temperature was 4 degrees Celsius and falling. And that the one person I could reach immediately, the one person whose address I knew because I had walked past it 3 times in the past month while doing errands in this neighborhood, was someone I had met exactly once. At a coffee shop 6 weeks earlier. His name was Theo. We had talked for 45 minutes about a book we had both been reading. He had given me his number with the ease of someone for whom that was a natural conclusion to a good conversation. I had texted him once, a reference to something we had discussed, and he had texted back with the same warmth he had shown in the coffee shop, and I had thought, I should see this person again. And then life had continued, and Daniel had required managing, and the thought had remained a thought. Now standing on the sidewalk with 4 degrees and a dead phone and a duffel bag, I made a calculation that was equal parts desperation, and if I was honest, something else. Something that had been waiting since the coffee shop. I walked 3 blocks to the ATM. I withdrew cash. I walked 2 more blocks to the convenience store and bought a cheap phone charger. I stood outside the store with my phone plugged into the external wall outlet, one of those Chicago pragmatisms, an outlet on the exterior of a building, and waited 4 minutes for enough charge. I found Theo's number. I called it. It rang 3 times. He answered. Theo, his voice was alert, not groggy. He had been awake. This is Sebastian, I said. We met at the coffee shop on Wicker Park in October. We talked about the Ishiguro novel, he said, immediately, without hesitation. Sebastian, I remember you. Something in my chest. I'm sorry to call this late, I said. I'm in a situation and I stopped. The situation, said aloud, felt more real than it had felt standing in it. I just got out of a relationship. Tonight, I'm on the street in your neighborhood with a bag and a dead phone and I don't. I stopped again. I know this is an extraordinary thing to ask a person you've met once. A pause on the line. Not a long pause, but deliberate. The pause of someone making a real decision rather than a reflexive one. What's the address on the corner nearest you? He said. I looked up at the street sign, told him. That's 4 blocks from me, he said. Come north on Damon, the blue door, 3rd building on the left past the pharmacy, apartment 2B. A pause. I'll put the kettle on. He hung up. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment. Then I picked up my bag and I walked north on Damon toward a blue door and a man I had met once and the specific terrifying comfort of someone choosing, without requirement, to let you in. The building was brick, old Chicago brick the color of dried clay, with a blue door that was exactly blue enough to be findable without being dramatic about it. I pressed 2B. The buzzer sounded immediately, which meant he had been watching for me, which meant something I was careful not to examine too directly. The stairs were narrow, and the building smelled of old wood and something cooking from another apartment. Second floor, door on the left. He opened it before I knocked. Theodore Nakamura was 29 years old, Japanese-American, with the kind of face that reads differently in different lights. In the coffee shop, he had been animated and warm, and the dominant impression had been of someone entirely comfortable being themselves. In his apartment doorway at 11:30 at night, he was quieter. The warmth was still present, but underneath it something more careful. The expression of someone who had made a decision and was now looking at the person that decision had produced. He was wearing a dark grey sweater, and his feet were bare on the apartment floor, and his hair, which had been neat in the coffee shop, was slightly less neat now, which suggested he had been doing something before I called that involved genuine absorption. "Come in," he said. I came in. The apartment was the first thing I noticed after him. It was the apartment of a person who lived deliberately. Not expensively, the furniture was modest, some of it clearly second-hand, chosen for function and arranged with care, but deliberately. Books everywhere, real accumulation rather than decoration. A drafting table in the corner with something in progress on it. Plants on the windowsills that were alive and clearly tended. Warm light from lamps rather than overhead fixtures, which produced the specific quality of a space that has been made rather than simply occupied. "Sit," he said, "anywhere." I sat in the armchair near the window. He disappeared into the kitchen and came back with 2 mugs of tea. He set one in front of me and sat on the sofa with the other, and he looked at me with the grey-brown eyes I remembered from the coffee shop. "Tell me what happened," he said, not prying, not performing concern, the genuine invitation of someone who has the capacity to listen. I told him. The 2 years with Daniel, the way I had managed myself down to fit the space he allowed, the things I had accepted, the things I had stopped doing, stopped wanting, stopped being, in the gradual erosion that happens when you stay in something that does not fit because staying feels safer than the alternative. And tonight, the conversation, the clarity, the leaving. I told him more than I intended to, not because I was unguarded, I was the most guarded person I knew, but because something about this room and this person and the quality of attention he was paying produced honesty the way certain temperatures produce condensation, inevitably, from the air itself. When I finished, the tea was half gone and the clock on his wall said 12:15. "How long did you know it wasn't right?" he asked. "A year," I said, "maybe longer." "Why did you stay?" The question I had been asking myself on the sidewalk. "Fear," I said, "of being alone, of starting over, of what it meant about me that I had chosen something that didn't fit." He held his mug in both hands and looked at me steadily. "It doesn't mean anything about you," he said, "except that you were trying. Most people who stay in the wrong thing are trying. They're not weak, they're just still hopping." I looked at him. "You sound like you know something about that," I said. A brief pause, his first. "I do," he said, simply, not expanding, filing it for later. He stood up. "I have a guest room," he said, "small, but it has a bed and a door that closes. You can stay tonight." He looked at me directly, "Not as a favor, because I want to and because you need it, and those 2 things are sufficient." I stood up. I was taller than him by perhaps 2 inches, and he looked up at me with the even gaze of someone who is not intimidated by height or circumstance or the specific strangeness of having a near stranger in his apartment at midnight. "Thank you, Theo," I said. "Thank you for calling," he said. Which was not what I had expected him to say. I thought about that, lying in the small guest room with the door closed, and the city sounds outside, and the muffled presence of another person in the apartment, for a long time before I slept. "Thank you for calling." As if my need had given him something. As if the asking had not been burden but gift. I did not understand this yet. I was beginning to. I woke at 7 to the smell of coffee and the sound of someone moving in a kitchen with the comfortable efficiency of someone who has done this alone for a long time and has their own rhythm. I lay still for a moment. The guest room was small and the ceiling was old plaster with a hairline crack that ran from the light fixture toward the window, and the light coming in was the specific gray of a Chicago November morning. I was in a stranger's apartment. My phone had enough charge to show me 17 texts from Priya and 4 from Marcus, who had apparently been contacted by Priya, and 2 missed calls from Daniel, which I did not listen to. I texted Priya, "I'm okay, stayed with a friend, call you this morning." I got up, I found the bathroom. I looked at myself in the mirror with the specific assessment of a morning after a significant night. I looked not as bad as I expected, the specific resilience of having done the right thing even when the right thing was hard. The face of someone who had been scared on a sidewalk and had chosen, instead of collapsing, to walk towards something. I came out of the bathroom and Theo was in the kitchen. He was cooking eggs. He was wearing the same sweater as the night before, and he had coffee on the counter and the radio playing low, and he looked up when I appeared in the kitchen doorway and he said, "How do you take your eggs?" "However is easiest," I said. "That's not an answer," he said. "I make good eggs, tell me how you want them." "Scrambled," I said, "soft." He nodded and went back to the pans. I sat at the kitchen table and wrapped my hands around the coffee mug he had placed there before I arrived, which meant he had heard me in the bathroom and put the coffee out, and it was ready when I sat down, and I looked around the kitchen in the morning light. Maury plants, an African violet on the windowsill that was blooming with small purple flowers, a wooden knife block that had been well used, a child's drawing pinned to the refrigerator with a magnet, which I would ask about later, a shelf of cookbooks that had been used rather than displayed. The eggs arrived, perfect, the way eggs are when someone actually knows what they are doing. We ate and the radio played, and the Chicago morning moved outside the window, and it was, impossibly, comfortable. The specific comfort of a space that has been made by a person who knows how to make a space, and of a person in it who extends that making to whoever is present. "I should find somewhere today," I said. "I'll call Priya, she has a cooch." He looked at me across the table. "You don't have to rush," he said. "You've already done." "Sebastian," his voice was even, "I have a guest room, it is not being used, you are not an imposition," a pause, "unless you want to leave, in which case leave, but don't leave because you think you should." I looked at him. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, not suspiciously, genuinely, because I wanted to understand and because understanding required asking. He was quiet for a moment. "Because 6 years ago," he said, "someone did this for me. I was 23 and I had just come out, and my family's response had not been what I hoped, and I was in a city I didn't know very well, and a woman I had met twice let me stay in her guest room for 3 weeks and fed me and asked nothing in return except that I pay it forward when I could." He looked at his coffee. Her name was Diane. "She taught me that the right response to someone needing a door opened is to open it." He looked up at me, "So I'm opening the door." I held this. "I'm gay," I said, not a non sequitur, a response to what he had said, coming out as its own kind of door opening. He nodded. "I know," he said, "you mentioned Daniel. I mean, I'm saying it, out loud, to you, because you said what you said and it felt like the right time to say the true thing." He looked at me with the gray-brown eyes. "I'm gay too," he said, in case that wasn't apparent. "I wasn't sure," I said. "Now you are," he said. And we finished our eggs in the November morning light, and the radio played something I did not know, but that sounded like jazz, and the African violet bloomed on the windowsill, and I did not call Priya about the cooch. I stayed that day, and the day after, not because I had nowhere else to go. I had called Priya, and she had a cooch, and Marcus had a spare room, and I had options. I stayed because the apartment on the second floor of the brick building with the blue door was the first place in 2 years where I had felt not comfortable exactly. That word was too small. I felt visible. seen in the specific way that happens when someone pays you the kind of attention that has no agenda attached to it. And I was not ready to give that up. Not yet. Not for a couch or a spare room or any of the reasonable alternatives. I was not ready to leave the blue door. I stayed 4 days. Then 6, then 10. Not because of emergency. Not because I had nowhere else to go. Because Theo did not make me feel like I should leave, and I did not want to, and those two facts together were sufficient. The structure of the days established itself with the organic ease of two people who are compatible in their rhythms, discovering that compatibility. Theo worked from home. He was a graphic novelist, which explained the drafting table and the books, and the particular quality of absorption I had interrupted with my late-night call. He worked mornings intensely and emerged from his studio space around noon with the slightly altered quality of someone returning from an interior journey. I worked remotely too. I was a copywriter, freelance, with enough clients that the work continued regardless of where I was sitting. I set up at the kitchen table with my laptop, and Theo worked at his drafting table, and we occupied the apartment in a parallel that was not intrusive and not lonely. Two people working in the same space, occasionally making each other coffee, occasionally reading aloud something interesting, occasionally sitting in complete silence for an hour that felt like company rather than absence. I had not experienced this before, this specific quality of shared solitude. With Daniel, solitude had been the gaps between performances, the moments when no one needed managing or impressing or appeasing. Alone had felt like relief. With Theo, alone together felt like something I had been wanting without knowing what to call it. I noticed things about him in the way you notice things about people when you share a space rather than visit it. He made his bed every morning with the same attention he gave his drafting work. He listened to jazz in the mornings and silence in the afternoons. He had strong opinions about coffee and relaxed opinions about most things that were not coffee. He was patient with difficult things, a phone call with a difficult editor, a piece of his current project that was not working the way he wanted, in the way that people are patient when they have developed the skill deliberately rather than having it naturally. He had a story, I understood, that was not all told. The thing he had mentioned on the first night, the experience at 23 that Diane's open door had addressed, had edges I could see without being able to see the whole of it. I did not push. He would tell me what he told me in the way and the time he chose. This was the courtesy that the guest room had established between us. He had given me space and time without requirement. I gave him the same. On the 5th day, he showed me his work. Not casually, with the specific deliberateness of someone making a choice. He spread the pages of his current graphic novel project on the kitchen table, physical pages, drawn and inked by hand, his handwriting in the caption boxes, his drawings in the panels. The story was about two men finding their way back to themselves after significant loss. The drawing style was precise and warm, the kind of visual storytelling that carried emotion without sentimentality. I looked at the pages for a long time. "This is extraordinary," I said, not a compliment, a statement of fact. "It's not finished," he said. "The unfinished parts don't matter," I said. "What's here is extraordinary. The way you," I pointed to a panel, a single figure standing in a city street, the body language of someone who is trying to look like they are not lost. The way you draw loneliness, it's the most accurate visual representation of something interior I've seen." He looked at the panel. "I know what that looks like from the inside," he said quietly. "So do I said. We looked at the page together, two people recognizing the same interior landscape in a drawing. "The person in this story," I said carefully. "Is it autobiographical?" A pause. "Parts," he said. "The loss is real. The recovery is," he stopped. "The recovery is what I'm still working out, in the story and otherwise." I looked at him. "What did you lose?" I asked, as gently as it can be asked. He was quiet for a long moment. "A relationship," he said, "that I thought was the whole of my future, and when it ended I realized I had built so much of my identity around it that without it I didn't know what was left." He touched the edge of the page. I've been drawing my way back to myself for 2 years. This project is part of that. I held this. Is it working? I asked. He looked at the pages, then at me. More than it was, he said, recently. The word recently. I did not examine it immediately, but I felt it. Day 8. We had fallen into the habit of cooking dinner together, not by agreement, by accumulation. The first night I had offered to cook, because I felt I should contribute something, and he had accepted, and the meal had been decent, and the company had been better than decent, and it had happened again the next night and the one after, until cooking dinner together was simply what the evening contained. On day 8 I was making pasta, and he was doing something with tomatoes at the counter beside me, and the kitchen was warm, and the music he had put on was something instrumental, and the window behind the sink showed the Chicago evening, streetlights beginning, and the specific blue of a winter dusk. He was close. Not unusually close. The kitchen was small and we were both in it, but I was aware of the closeness in a way I had not allowed myself to be aware of before. The specific warmth of another person at approximately arm's length. The way he moved in the kitchen, which was different from how he moved elsewhere, more fluid, more at ease, the domestic space producing a relaxation in him that the studio or the street did not. I had been aware of Theo as attractive since the coffee shop in October. This was a fact I had managed carefully, the way I managed things I was not sure were appropriate to feel. But on day 8 in the kitchen, with the pasta water boiling and the tomatoes releasing their smell into the warm air, the management felt unnecessary. I was no longer in a relationship. I had not been for 8 days. I was in an apartment with a man I found genuinely compelling, not just physically, though that was present, but in every way that mattered. His intelligence, his patience, his drawings, his practice of attention, his ability to hold space for another person without filling it with his own requirements. He turned to say something, and we were closer than either of us had calculated, and for a moment neither of us moved. The kitchen, the pasta water, the tomatoes, the instrumental music. His face very close, with the grey-brown eyes and the expression of someone who has just arrived at a moment they were not planning for, and is assessing it honestly rather than reflexively. I stepped back, gently, not with panic, with care. Sorry, I said. Don't be, he said, also carefully. We finished cooking in a slightly altered silence, not uncomfortable. The specific quality of air after a moment has passed through it and changed its character. We ate at the kitchen table, and the conversation found its way back to normalcy through the specific mechanism of two people who are good at being with each other. But the moment had happened, and we both knew it had happened, and we both knew that the other one knew. After dinner, he was washing dishes, and I was drying, and he said, without preamble, "How are you actually?" "What do you mean?" "I mean beyond the practical, beyond the apartment and the remote work and the—" He paused. "How are you inside, 8 days out?" I thought about it, honestly. "Better than I expected," I said, clearer, like something that was creating static has been turned off. A pause, and afraid. "Of what?" "Of what I feel," I said, "in general and specifically." He stopped washing. He turned and looked at me with the dish in his hand and the soapy water and the kitchen evening around us. "Sebastian," he said. "I know," I said. "I know the timing is." "The timing is what it is," he said. "I'm not concerned about the timing." A pause. "I'm concerned about you being certain, about what you want and what you're ready for." "I know what I want," I said. "I've known since the coffee shop in October. I just wasn't in a position to." "And now," he said. I looked at him. This man who had opened a door at midnight and put the kettle on and made eggs in the morning and shown me his drawings and changed the character of every room he was in simply by being present in it with full attention. "Now I'm asking," I said, "if you want the same thing." He put the dish down. He dried his hands on the towel hanging from the oven handle. He looked at me for a moment that was long enough to be honest. "I want to be careful with you," he said. Not because I don't, not because the feeling isn't there, but because you've just come through something, and what I want is something real and something that lasts. And for that to be possible, I need you to be ready. Actually ready. I'm ready, I said. How do you know? He asked, not challenging, genuinely wanting to understand. Because, I said, I've spent 2 years in something that felt like safety, but was actually the absence of anything real. And this, I gestured at the kitchen, the apartment, the accumulated 8 days. This feels real. Everything about it feels more real than anything in those 2 years, and I am not confused about the difference. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he crossed the kitchen, and he stood in front of me, and he put his hand against my face, cupped my jaw, and looked at me with the grey-brown eyes with something in them that was not careful at all. Okay, he said. Just that. And I put my hand over his, and we stood in the kitchen with the dishwater and the music and the Chicago evening outside, and it was the most real moment I had experienced in years. He was careful with me that night and in the days that followed, not distant, not withholding, careful the way you are careful with something you actually value, the way you handle something that matters. And I understood for the first time, really understood, in my body rather than just my mind, the difference between someone managing you and someone caring for you. They can feel similar from the outside. From the inside, they are not similar at all. From the inside, one of them makes you smaller, and one of them makes you more yourself. And in Theo's apartment, in the room with the drafting table and the jazz and the African violet on the windowsill, I was becoming daily more myself. I did not know yet how much more there was to become. November became December. I did not get the apartment, not immediately. Priya found me a sublet in Wicker Park, 2 blocks from Theo's building, which was either coincidence or the universe being unsubtle, and I moved into it in early December with the modest collection of things I had retrieved from Daniel's apartment on a Tuesday morning when he was at work. Moving out of Theo's guest room was a different experience than I had anticipated. He helped me carry things. He made coffee in travel cups for the 2 of us, and we walked the 2 blocks to the sublet, and we set up the basic furniture, a bed frame from a second-hand shop on Milwaukee Avenue, a kitchen table that had been in the sublet already, a lamp that Theo had brought from his own apartment without asking. You don't have to give me your lamp, I said. I have 3, he said. The apartment needs light. I looked at him in the bare sublet apartment with the lamp in his hand. Theo, I said. What? Thank you for the 11 days, for, I stopped. The gratitude was too large for the sentence I was trying to put it in. Sebastian, he said, stop thanking me. I'll stop thanking you when the gratitude runs out, I said. When will that be? I genuinely don't know, I said. It hasn't so far. He looked at me with the expression I had come to know in 11 days of living in his apartment, the one that arrived when something amused him and he was deciding whether to show it. He showed it. Good, he said. December. 2 blocks was not the same as 1 apartment, but it was close enough for the rhythm to continue. We had dinner most evenings, alternating apartments. He brought his drafting work to my kitchen table sometimes, and I brought my laptop to his, and the parallel working that had developed in the guest room continued in the negotiated space between 2 nearby addresses. We were in the vocabulary of a relationship that was finding its language together, in the full sense of the word, not yet with the ease that time would eventually produce, but with the deliberate, attentive, daily choice of 2 people who have found something worth choosing. He was careful with me in the way he had said he would be. Not managed or controlled careful, the other kind, the kind that says I see that this is new and tender and I will not rush it or force it or require it to be more certain than it is. The kind that gives something space to grow at its own pace rather than the pace demanded by impatience. I learned things about him in December. His family, his mother was Japanese-American, his father 4th-generation Irish, and the specific combination of cultural backgrounds had produced a man who carried multiple identities with a comfort that I found inspiring and that I understood had been arrived at through difficulty rather than given. Coming out at 23 had been difficult. His father had taken years. His mother had been better, then worse, then better again, in the specific nonlinear progress of a parent working through something they had not expected. They were now close. The child's drawing on his refrigerator was his nephew's, his older sister's son, who was 6 and who drew Theo regularly, and with the specific uncritical affection of a child who knows they are loved without complication. "Your sister was okay with it?" I asked. We were on his sofa in December, the city doing what Chicago does in December, which involves a level of winter commitment that other cities discuss but do not fully execute. "Immediately," he said. "She said she'd known since I was 12 and she'd been waiting for me to figure it out." "Older siblings," I said. "The best and worst people," he agreed. The relationship he had lost, the one the graphic novel was working through, was named James. They had been together 4 years. The breakup, 2 years before the November night I called from a Chicago sidewalk, had been mutual in the sense that both of them had eventually acknowledged what one of them had known for longer, that they had grown in directions the relationship could not contain. "Do you miss him?" I asked, carefully, because the question mattered and the answer mattered more. Theo was quiet for a moment. "I miss who we were at the beginning," he said. "I miss the person I was when I was with him, early, before things got complicated. I don't miss what it became." He looked at the ceiling. "Missing the beginning of something is different from missing the person." "I know," I said. "You miss Daniel." "No," I said, immediately, then more honestly. "I miss the idea I had of him, the version I kept trying to make him be." A pause. "I don't miss who he actually was." Theo looked at me. "That's very clear-eyed," he said. "I've had time to think," I said. 11 days in your apartment. "And since?" I agreed. He reached over and took my hand, and we sat in the December apartment with the winter outside, and the lamp he had given me 2 blocks away in my sublet, and the specific warm quality of a life being rebuilt carefully and well. He finished it in February. I knew he was close because the drafting table had accumulated a quality of intensity that it did not have at other times. He worked longer in the mornings. He emerged at noon with the particular expression of someone in the final stages of a large creative work, simultaneously exhausted and illuminated, the combination that happens when you are close to completing something that has cost you significantly. On the Saturday in February, when he drew the final panel, he called me. "Come over," he said. I came over. He was at the kitchen table with the entire project spread across it. All the pages, in sequence, the complete visual narrative of 2 men finding their way back to themselves after significant loss. I read it the way you read something that someone has made from their interior, with full attention, without rushing. From the first page to the last, which ended with a single panel, 2 figures on a Chicago street, facing the same direction, not touching but close, the city around them winterlit and specific. When I finished, I looked up. Theo was watching me. "Well," he said. "It's the truest thing I've ever read," I said. "The truest visual thing. I stopped. It's going to matter to a lot of people, the people who need to know that the way back to yourself is possible, that it doesn't look the way you expect, but it's possible." He looked at the pages. "It changed while I was writing it," he said. "The ending changed." "What was the original ending?" "The figures were alone," he said, "each one finding themselves independently. That was the story I thought I was telling." "And now they're together," I said. "Now they're together," he said. I looked at the final panel, the 2 figures, the city, the winter light. "Theo," I said. "Yeah. Is this about us?" A pause, the longest pause I had seen from him. "Parts of it have become about us," he said. "The ending specifically." He looked at me. "Is that okay?" "It's more than okay," I said. The right word came. "It's the most beautiful thing anyone has ever done with my story." He looked at me across the kitchen table with the pages between us and the February morning outside the window and the African violets still blooming on the windowsill, small and purple and entirely serious about its continued existence. "Sebastian," he said. "Yeah, I'm in love with you." He said it with the directness he gave everything, not a dramatic declaration, a statement of fact, delivered with the care of someone who knows the weight of the words and has chosen them anyway. I wanted to wait until the book was done, until I was sure it wasn't just the gratitude of having someone here during the finishing of it. I've been sure for a while. I wanted you to know. The kitchen, the pages, the February light. I had loved Daniel in the way you love something you are trying to make work, with effort and hope and the persistent optimism of someone who believes the right approach will eventually produce the right result. I had not known, until this kitchen and this man and these months, what it felt like to love someone the other way, the way that does not require effort because it is simply true, the way that makes you more yourself rather than less, the way that arrives not as a conclusion but as a recognition, this person, this one, this specific irreplaceable human being. "I'm in love with you too," I said. "I've been since November, since the Blue Door." "Since the coffee shop," he said, "if we're being fully honest." "Since the coffee shop," I agreed. He stood up from the table. He came around to where I was sitting, and I stood, and we were close in the way we had been in the kitchen on day 8, but this time neither of us stepped back. He put his hands on my face. I put mine on his. And we were both laughing. The laughing that happens when the moment you have been moving toward for months arrives and turns out to be exactly what you hoped, and the relief of it has nowhere to go except laughter. "Hi," he said. "Hi," I said. "Thank you for calling me that night," he said. "Thank you for answering," I said. Spring. The graphic novel was submitted to his publisher in March and accepted in April with the specific enthusiasm of an editor who understands when something is significant. Publication in November, 1 year, almost exactly, from the night I called from the sidewalk. I found a real apartment in April, not the sublet, a place with a lease in my name and enough room for a proper desk and a kitchen that was bigger than the sublets and windows that faced east for the morning light. Theo helped me move in. He brought the lamp back that he had lent me in December, which I had never returned because it had become part of the apartment's light, and returning it would have changed the quality of the space. "You gave me this lamp," I said, when he set it on the table. "I'm giving it back to you properly," he said. "It's yours, it was always yours." I looked at him in the new apartment with its east-facing windows and its proper desk and its kitchen with enough room. "Stay tonight," I said. He looked around the apartment, at the boxes still to be unpacked, at the lamp on the table, at the windows showing the Chicago spring, which had arrived with the specific relief that Chicago spring always carries, the city remembering that warmth exists after all. "I was going to ask you the same thing," he said. "We cooked dinner in the new kitchen, we unpacked boxes until midnight, we stayed. Not one night. The first of many." The graphic novel was published in November. The cover was the final panel, the two figures on the winter street, facing the same direction, close but not touching, the city around them specific and real. Theo had dedicated it simply, "For Sebastian, who called." I read the dedication on the copy he gave me, and I thought about the November sidewalk and the dead phone, and the specific desperation of a person who has just watched their life rearrange into something unrecognizable. I thought about what it had rearranged into. About the blue door, the kettle on, the eggs in the morning, the 11 days in the guest room, the lamp, the graphic novel, the February kitchen and the pages spread across the table and the words said across them. I thought about Diane, who had opened her door for a 23-year-old Theo and asked only that he pay it forward when he could. I thought about the forward that payment had produced. And I understood something that I had been slowly understanding for a year, that the moments that feel like endings, the sidewalk, the dead phone, the November cold, are sometimes not endings at all. Sometimes they are the specific, necessary, terrifying condition for the beginning of the thing you were actually looking for. You have to lose the wrong fit to find the right one. You have to stand on a sidewalk with a dead phone before you walk toward the blue door. The blue door has to open, and someone has to be on the other side of it, awake, willing, ready to put the kettle on. I had been that lucky. I intended to spend a long time being grateful for it.